This is the Sergio Rodriguez Show.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Sergio Rodriguez Show. Joining me right now, Justin Solotoff, a guy who has one of the best fantasy sports leagues you can imagine. Top guys, everybody. There's only one person missing from your league. You know who that is?
You.
Me, definitely. I'm missing from that league. Absolutely. But you guys know if you put me in there, I'm winning that.
Yes.
Justin, let's start with your personal business. Fairfield Physical Therapy, been around forever. What exactly do you got? Who do you treat? What do you treat? What's going on with the facility?
So I was the owner of Fairfield Physical Therapy Center for 20 years. Actually sold out to Jag 1 PT. And now I'm the clinical director of Jag 1 PT, Fairfield Commons. And we treat patients of all various ages, different diagnoses from 5 all the way to 90. And, we're busy. We've seen a lot of your softball girls have come by and also, work for me, done volunteer work for me. And, I love it. I've been doing physical therapy for 26 years now and have a passion for helping heal people.
Speak to me about the fantasy league. I want to know more about the baseball one because I know you do one in football, but speak to me about the baseball one. Baseball's very engaging every day with the fantasy league. It's rough, right? How do you keep track of all that stuff? Because even a guy who's a big sports fan like me, I don't even do the baseball angle.
Yeah, so a lot of people drop out of the baseball leagues for that reason. Luckily, I don't do any daily fantasy leagues. So it's a weekly fantasy league. So on Sunday night, Monday morning, you have to set your lineups, and then those players are essentially in for the week. But it's still a lot of work. You got to keep track of players who get hurt, players who come on the free agent list. To my advantage back in the early years, I don't really sleep much, and so I was the first guy to watch. Somebody go down on the West Coast game, a closer, and get that guy off the free agent list. And now we do waiver wires. So, but it's a great league. Like you had mentioned, Peter King's been in the league for a long time. And family and friends. The league's been going on for 25 years now with the same players, and we have a great time. We're in a 6x6 league, and we just did our draft 2 nights ago, and we do it off of Yahoo. We have a great time with it.
Give me the hot player this year. Who's the guy that everybody wanted this year going in?
Well, I would say Julio Rodriguez. I think Julio Rodriguez is going to have an MVP type season. He is a hot player right now.
You guys put a lot of emphasis on strikeouts because I know some leagues operate a lot with the strikeout being a negative. Does your league operate like that?
Yeah, so we actually are positive for that. We have, in terms of the players striking out, the batters. Yeah, no, we actually eliminated all our negative categories. We used to have saves minus blown saves for net saves, but we eliminated all of the negative categories, so we are only in positive categories. But we also use, as part of the 6x6, instead of batting average, we use on-base percentage because we believe that that's a better indicator of a player's talent. A walk is as good as a hit, right? And so people who own Barry Bonds, probably one of the greatest hitters of all time, sans the steroids, was actually losing out because batting average was being counted, he was being walked so much. We also have hits as a category, so he was very low in the hits category, and so they were losing. So we switched to on-base percentage, so it evened those things out. So you have guys let's say like Carlos Santana, who's a perfect example. He'll have a 230.
Not the singer,
no,
right?
Not the singer, no.
Okay.
Although he might be able to sing, I'm not really sure. But Carlos Santana, who has a lifetime about 238 batting average, a lifetime 368 on base percentage.
Because I know one of the hot guys in a couple of leagues that I speak to that do the strikeout thing is Jose Ramirez.
Right.
Right? Because he high production, low strikeout.
Right, yes.
But then you'll have a guy like Judge, Trout,
right.
High production, 200 strikeouts.
Yeah.
That's big.
Yeah, what was happening, ironically, Judge always had a high on-base percentage and was not a big strikeout guy, but they really expanded the zone on him last year. He was having they were calling strikes that were by his ankles and up by his chest, and that never happened before, because for a big guy, he actually has a really good batting eye. So, but you're right, those guys would be penalized in leagues that count negative categories like that.
We had Dave Mazur on before you came on, associate AD at St. John's, and now Rick Pitino is there. You're a big St. John's guy. You grew up there. You went there. Tell me about your expectations now that St. John's has what they hope is a life-altering coach for that university.
So as we had talked about this a couple of times, and first of all, let me correct you, because I actually didn't go to St. John's, I went to Emory. So a Jewish kid at St. John's, my grandmother would be rolling in her grave. So, but we are lifelong St. John's fans, and me like you and my kids like your kids have sort of suffered through the years. We can remember back to 1985, 86 with Chris Mullen and being in the Final Four, but it's been much more heartache, than happy times for St. John's. So Rick Pitino is the ultimate hire for St. John's. Not only is he a great coach, but if you listen to his press conference, he spoke to how he, and as did Father Shanley, Luke Hornacek, Mike Craig, spoke to how great a character builder he is, how much of a father figure he is to the players. And that's another reason why I believe that a lot of the kids love playing for Rick Pitino. And what was really great to hear was kind of what you alluded to before. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when for him. And he essentially put the entire roster, except for Joel Soriano, on notice that if you're not going to comply with the type of character kid that he needs, mostly because his practices are so difficult, if you're not going to comply with the character type kid that he needs, you're not going to be on the team. He essentially told players to go find another school. And Omar Stanley's in the transfer portal. Rafael Pinzon's already in the transfer portal. They're holding on a couple players. We're hoping AJ Storr come back. Brandon Gardner, big time recruit, stays with Pitino. But essentially, it's the first time you trust in not only the administrative system that's set up with Mike Craig, who did a great job at Duke. We were not seeing those positive effects at St. John's yet, but also with Rick Pitino, who brought with him his entire Iona coaching staff, which essentially, in my opinion, from a coaching standpoint, all of those are, no offense to Mike Anderson, who's a great person, better coaches than everybody on the St. John's staff.
I mentioned before in my opening that I had a problem with Georgetown hiring Cooley away from Providence. How did it strike you?
So a couple points to this. First of all, what's interesting is Father Shanley, who was instrumental in establishing Providence Rise since the Rick Pitino, Billy Donovan days, and really that harped on and was built from the ground up based on the boosters, which St. John's and Mike Repoli and those guys already said that if we hire Rick Pitino, they're going to come back. But building a facility that's second to none. If you've gone inside St. John's locker rooms and their facilities, they're really downtrodden. And so not only did St. John's, who the kids back in the day were living in the city, St. John's were providing, the Chris Mullins and those kids, Walter Berry's with apartments.
St. John's had the initial NIL stuff going on because we were paying guys essentially to live off campus.
To live off campus, right. And so nobody wants to do that. They want to be in these big, beautiful dorms. And the Providence facility is second to none. So not only the hiring of Ed Cooley, who's one of the better coaches of college basketball, and them being able to recruit great players, but he is a great in-game coach. What St. John's has been missing is the great in-game coach. We have seen coaches, and we both love Steve Lavin, but coaches who is a great recruiter, who essentially almost step away from the huddle when they're in timeouts. The great coaches who, like Pitino, who their teams come out of a timeout and they want to play like that's an amazing play. Our kids come out and turn the ball over. But as far as the Cooley hiring at Georgetown, and ironically, very interesting, so that there's this Shanley connection between St. John's bringing in Rick Pitino and Ed Cooley going to Georgetown, so there's an interesting link there. But one thing is that Ed Cooley is getting $6 million a year to coach at Georgetown. Rick Pitino is getting $20 million over 6 years. I find that interesting. Secondly, to the positive, because I think that college basketball as a whole, not just the Big East, needs St. John's and Georgetown to rise back to prominence. They really do. Those were the great glory days of basketball. So I'm okay from that standpoint. The hiring of Kim English is kind of interesting to me. A coach at George Mason for, I think, 12 years, who has a decent track record. That school won 20 games for the first time. But to me, it was a quick hire. And it was a hire that was done kind of impulsively, when I think that is a desirable job that could have opened up to maybe more prominent coaches. But I do agree, it really never happens. It's like leaving your wife to sleep with her sister and marry her sister.
It was crazy. And again, to me, it's more just a disrespect to the league.
Yes. It's an unwritten, unspoken rule. You don't do that.
Yeah, I had an issue with that. The NCAA tournament, a lot of chaos, a lot of the older teams, a lot of basically teams that were put together through the transfer portal. Where do you see the landscape of college basketball moving forward? I think, ironically, this is what St. John's and Georgetown needed to be viable now. And the other thing that's happening is the Blue Bloods.
Yeah.
Those days are over.
Carolina didn't make
Those
the
days are
tournament.
over.
Kentucky
They'll have
lost
their
early.
years and they'll
Right.
get players.
Yeah.
But the days of North Carolina and Kentucky and Duke grabbing the 5 freshmen that are top, those guys at 18, even though they're going to be in the NBA,
Oh, yeah, sure.
they still can't compete with the 22-year-old grown men.
Oh yeah, I have a perfect example of that player. I was telling my oldest son Aiden, who's a very good basketball player in the center, is Drew Timmy. You watch him play, and his footwork is unbelievable. For a guy who's really not that athletic, he is dominating games. He has a feel for the game that these other players don't have. He has a passion for the game and his team winning that a lot of these kids. They use college basketball as a stepping stone to the NBA because you can't go straight out of high school anymore. Like you said, that Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina, they'll have their McDonald's All-Americans who are sitting at the end of the bench, who score 3 points a game, who will be first-round draft picks on the prospects of what they did in high school. So those are the kind of, if you ask me to name two college basketball players who were my favorite to watch, one of them favorite person, maybe not so much the second one, but who I thought you could learn from would be Christian Laettner, who I think, while he was not a good pro, has to go down as one of the 5 greatest.
And I
college
don't,
basketball
and
players.
everybody says he wasn't a good pro. He was in the NBA a long time.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so,
but to your point, he was arguably the greatest college basketball player of all time.
Yeah. It's the equivalent of Tim Tebow to football. Nobody will ever point to Tim Tebow as being one of the a great pro quarterback, but he was one of the greatest college quarterbacks. And really, the number one person is Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan stayed for 4 years at Wake Forest. Tim Duncan had fundamentals like nobody's business. What the kids and the youth of today can learn from are these type of players. What the schools like St. John's can benefit from, even though it would be interesting to see, because Pitino, Calipari, those guys, Pitino is notorious for bringing guys over and sort of towards the end of his career, this is the one and done. But he did develop guys like Smith and Mitchell and those guys at Louisville who stayed for a while and then won him a national championship. I think he's going to preach that more. And what those guys bring to the game is not only more smarts, better coaching, but they bring more of a passion to win. They've been there, they've been through the grueling, practices. These freshmen have not. They're just looking to get their one and done and leave.
Before I let you go, speak to me about the whole Edwin Diaz thing. You have an interesting take on how you think he got hurt, etc.
Yeah, so 2 things on the Edwin Diaz is one, that because he had asked the guys before what impact that it has. I mean, having done fantasy baseball forever, I could back your statement that says that fantasy closers are sort of irrelevant. They've drafted towards the latter part of the draft, and while they are important, it seems like when all said and done, 10 guys from the free agent list that you pick up that were not even drafted are guys that are just as good as the guys in the first 2 rounds. But to Edwin Diaz's point and why he is so valuable to the Mets is not so much that the combination of Robertson and Ottavino or whoever it's going to be is going to accumulate 35, 40, 45 saves. The issue is this. Buck Showalter is notorious for burning his bullpen out. And the Mets relievers, you can see this towards the latter half of the year, between Ottavino and May, were fried. You almost could guarantee they would give up a run every time they entered the game. So what Edwin Diaz taking him off the team does is it means that they have to go to these guys who were set up to be the 7th and 8th inning guys as the closers, and also you have old pitchers on this team. Verlander and Scherzer, while they're workhorses, Scherzer, DeGrom, and Bassett, you killed the Mets at the end.
And not only that, with the pitch clock and guys working faster.
Right, yeah.
I would tell you that guys are going to throw 7 to 10 pitches less a game now.
Okay.
So to your point, you're going to add another basically 2/3 of an inning per game in bullpen. Right. Do that over a $1.62.
Exactly. It's a lot of
It's a lot of
innings. You got Verlander and Scherzer who are old, and also you have to expect more hits in play because there's no shift anymore. So these pitchers are going to be out there longer than they would have been before, right? So the Diaz injury take is that if you watch the replay of what happened to him, and he won the game, and he sort of celebrated, and 2 players came out onto the field. They didn't jump on him. They didn't tackle him. They essentially put their arms around him and jumped up and down 4 times before he crumbled to the ground. You know what that tells me? That tendon's about to go. But that was going. The Mets fans would have been lamenting the fact that he was hurt for the year, but at the same time would not be griping for 5 hours on WFAN if it happened with him covering first base in the 3rd game of the season versus him playing in the World Baseball Classic. Okay, so that, and the thing that this was interesting, the trainers came out on the field. Now, you would normally see some kind of a cart come out, and they would put the brace, like in a brace of some sort, that air cast, and then they would take him out. They had 2 baseball players, firemen, carry him off the field. I knew that was the injury because initially the report was that it was an ACL tear, but I knew that was the injury because when you firemen carry somebody who has a patellar tendon tear, and the patellar tendon connects from the tibia to the femur, gravity causes it to separate immediately. It is beyond painful. If you watch, he makes them drop him immediately, and it is dragging his leg the entire rest of the time till they get him to the wheelchair. The same person who had that injury, that the same thing happened to, and he never played again, Victor Cruz. Victor Cruz in Philadelphia tore his patellar tendon, and a fireman carried him off the field.
So you're saying it's a Hispanic man's injury?
Yeah, bro, of course.
Justin Solotoff, ladies and gentlemen, and you've been listening to the Sergio Rodriguez Show.
This is the Sergio Rodriguez Show.